Squirrelogy by Barrie Mahoney. My first encounter with a squirrel was not a happy one. I was about 5 years old and we had just arrived for my first holiday in Bournemouth, staying with my elderly great-aunt in her Victorian home. I still remember entering the old house through a small conservatory that housed many glass cases in which were collections of stuffed birds and animals. I clearly remember several small birds trapped in a frozen, lifeless state behind glass walls. A beautiful fox with its mouth open, ready to devour whatever the taxidermist had imagined when preparing the poor creature for display. To me, this later became the stuff of nightmares. The one creature that I still remember in considerable detail was a small red squirrel holding an acorn in its claws, staring at me with its lifeless glass eyes. This squirrel haunted me for my entire holiday, and it got to the point where I couldn't bear to look at the poor creature. I ran whenever I had to pass by to avoid its sad stare. My great-aunt's home represented a time when killing and sticking pins into butterflies for display and installing birds and small animals into glass cases was seen as acceptable. Thankfully, in some ways, some things have changed for the better. Several years later, I had the opportunity to become acquainted with red squirrels that have become synonymous with Brownsea Island, that small enchanted island strategically placed in Poole Harbour in Dorset. Brownsea Island is one of the few places in England where red squirrels thrive, although sadly I understand that many are now infected with a form of squirrel leprosy. As a visitor, and later as a teacher, escorting hordes of children through the island's woodland, the squirrel's playful charm and shy curiosity always entertained and amused us, but only if the children were silent. They're cautious creatures, and only occasionally would they appear, much to the annoyance of my pupils, who found it very hard to be quiet. When I lived in the UK, I often used to walk through woodlands, as well as more populated areas, such as the seafront gardens in Bournemouth, where squirrels of the grey variety, or even bolder and more curious, and their red cousins, will compete with the pigeons for pieces of sandwiches, crisps, and any other goodies that visitors would offer them. In short, over the years, I've fallen for the subtle charms of squirrels, of whatever colour, whatever variety. When we moved to the Canary Islands, I thought I'd not see them again, but how wrong I was. During a holiday on the Canary Island of Fuerteventura, we came across many squirrels close to Calete de Fuste, also known as Squirrel Mountain. These squirrels certainly put the UK's grey squirrels to shame in their cheeky boldness, as they definitely scamper up the arms of visitors to collect a tasty treat. These squirrels are the Moorish squirrel, or Barbary ground squirrel, and use their many charms to endear themselves to both the locals and visitors to the island. Due to their trusting and endearing nature, they have become a considerable tourism asset for the island. Fuerteventura squirrels, or to be more correct, Barbary ground squirrels, are not native to Fuerteventura, but were accidentally introduced to the island in 1965 as escapee pets. The two pet squirrels quickly bred. The climate and food sources were acceptable, and these endearing creatures have now successfully colonised much of the island. Indeed, large yellow and black signs imploring visitors not to feed the squirrels are now becoming commonplace around the island. In recent years, there have been serious university studies investigating the environmental impact that these illegal migrants have upon the island. I guess it could be described as a kind of Brexit plot against squirrels. I recall a time when university media studies courses were regarded as frivolous and not a proper degree, but it seems that any subject can be the focus of degree status nowadays, and a degree in squirrelology is clearly highly desirable. In true human compassion, initial conclusions, of course, indicate that these delightful creatures should be exterminated and considered as pests. However, at the time of writing, I'm pleased to report that after costing this remedy, it appears that it would be too expensive, if not impossible, to carry out. Thankfully, the focus will now be upon ensuring that these squirrels do not develop a taste for the other Canary Islands, and measures are in place to ensure that the more athletic squirrels do not paraglide into the other islands. For these squirrels, the impact of the global economic crisis has been positive, since it seems to have secured their future in Fuerteventura. But might I also suggest that if this growing population does become a problem, then some kind of non-harming birth control provided in their nuts might be the way forward? There is no doubt that despite squirrelology, the Fuerteventura squirrel has run its place in the hearts of locals and visitors alike. Officials are now becoming aware of the publicity value to the tourism that these furry migrants bring to the island. Indeed, many are now suggesting that the squirrel becomes the official logo of Fuerteventura. You have been listening to Squirrelology, and try saying that too fast when you've had a few drinks, which is part of the Letters from the Atlantic series by Barrie Mahoney. If you'd like to find more about myself and my books, please go to my website www.barriemahoney.com. And thank you for listening.